Do you know what it takes to step into the face of giants? To stare down something so much bigger than you that the odds scream failure? Most people shrink back, but not David. This shepherd boy walked into a battlefield where seasoned warriors trembled. Why? Because he saw something they didn't. He wasn't armed with just a sling and stones. He was armed with courage rooted in faith, a courage every believer is called to cultivate. But before we get into how he did it, here's the shocking truth. David wasn't a perfect man. Yes, the same David who defeated Goliath, wrote psalms of worship, and became king, also fell into scandal, heartbreak, and failure. It's not the polished version of David we sing about in Sunday school, is it? But his courage wasn't born in perfection. It was born in his humanity, in the messy places where most of us live. The beauty of David's story lies in this. God used a flawed man to accomplish extraordinary things. And if God could use David, he can use you too. But how? Let's go back to one of David's earliest moments of bravery. Not Goliath yet, but something smaller, quieter, and easy to overlook. When David was tending sheep, a lion and a bear attacked his flock. Alone, armed with nothing but his shepherd's tools, he didn't run. He didn't wait for someone else to step in. David stood his ground. What kind of person fights a lion to save sheep? A person who understands that courage begins in the small battles no one sees. Here's the thing. The lions in our lives don't always look like roaring beasts. They can be the relentless doubt in your mind, the fear of rejection, or the guilt you can't shake. The courage to face these battles is what prepares you for the giants ahead. And then came Goliath. You've probably heard the story so many times, it's almost lost its impact. But let me paint the scene differently. A boy steps onto a battlefield littered with fear. Israel's army stood frozen, paralyzed by the taunts of a giant who seemed undefeatable. Goliath wasn't just a big man. He was a symbol of everything that intimidates us: failure, fear, impossible circumstances. David didn't just defeat Goliath, he defeated what Goliath represented. What most people miss is that David's victory started long before he ever picked up that stone. It started in his mindset. He declared, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:37. That's not just confidence, that's history with God. David remembered what God had done before and let it fuel his courage. Think about your own life. How often do we forget our victories? We let fear blind us to the battles we've already won. But here's a truth you need to hold on to. Every victory, no matter how small, is proof of God's faithfulness. And that proof isn't just meant to comfort you, it's meant to embolden you. David's courage also came from something most people don't associate with bravery: humility. He didn't try to wear King Saul's armor. He didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't. He knew he couldn't fight Goliath on the giant's terms. Instead, he fought with what he knew: 5 smooth stones and a sling. Sometimes courage looks like rejecting what the world says you need and trusting that what God has given you is enough. Let's bring this into modern life. Have you ever felt unqualified? Maybe you faced a situation where everyone else seemed bigger, smarter, or more capable. It's easy to think you need to measure up to someone else's standard. But David's story shows us this. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. What you already have in your hands, your gifts, your experiences, your unique voice, are exactly what you need to face your battles. And yet David's life wasn't just about victory. There were moments of deep failure. His affair with Bathsheba and the fallout that followed is one of the Bible's most heartbreaking stories. But even in his brokenness, David modeled something incredible: repentance. In Psalm 51, he writes, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." True courage isn't just about winning battles, it's about facing your failures, owning your mistakes, and trusting that God's grace is bigger than your mess. Here's another layer of David's courage that's often overlooked: his ability to wait. After being anointed king, David didn't march straight to the throne. He spent years running from Saul, living in caves, and wondering when God's promise would be fulfilled. Waiting is hard. It's frustrating. But David teaches us that courage isn't just about action. It's also about patience. It's about trusting God's timing, even when it doesn't make sense. Now, let's get personal. What's your Goliath? Is it a toxic relationship you're afraid to leave? A dream you've put off because it feels too big? A past failure that whispers you'll never be enough? Like David, you have the power to face it. Not because you're strong, but because God is. Courage doesn't mean you're fearless. It means you trust God more than you fear the giants in front of you. Here are 4 powerful bonus truths about David that you can take with you. 1. David's courage was built in obscurity. The victories in the fields prepared him for the spotlight on the battlefield. Never underestimate the battles you fight in private. 2. David's greatest weapon wasn't his sling. It was his faith. Goliath had size, but David had God. Never let what you see overshadow what you believe. 3. David's repentance was as bold as his victories. He didn't hide from his failures. He brought them to God. Courage isn't about being flawless. It's about being faithful. 4. David's legacy wasn't just in his victories, but in his heart. The Bible calls him a man after God's own heart. Acts 13:22. Courage is ultimately about pursuing God above all else. Think about this. David's story isn't just history. It's a blueprint. It's a reminder that courage is for everyone, even the unlikely, even the overlooked, even you. The same God who strengthened David is ready to strengthen you. So the next time you stand before a giant, remember this: you are not alone. The battle is the Lord's, and victory is already written into your story. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and take that first courageous step today. You're not just a believer, you're a warrior. Let's live like it. Please subscribe to our channel today if you have not yet done so.